So now we're moving to social learning. Sometimes it's not called social learning, but actually considered a perspective. But it's part of that psychological theories and perspectives. We're talking about social learning. And so social learning, if I were to sum it up in, well, 2 words and a symbol, that's an ampersand, I would say it's about performance and response. That's the idea of social learning. There's a performance and there's a response. And I'm going to tell you right now that social learning, you're going to have to work to differentiate between social learning and cognitive development, which I'm going to talk about next. So social learning, the idea of it is performance and response. So a child does something, whatever that child does, and we say, oh, what a big boy. Oh, such a little lady, right? So they do something, and then we let them know how we feel about it, right? My son will sometimes put his hair's gotten sort of long because, well, I could probably just take him in for a haircut with a mask. It'd probably be okay. Anyway, so we sometimes put his hair back. He also likes it being in a ponytail and a bun. He sees his sister do it, his mom do it, so he thinks, I should do it too, right? So he does it some. Fine. So he does it, and my father-in-law saw it, and his hair back in a ponytail, and looked at my wife, right, and said, what is he, a hippie? Right? He thankfully didn't say it to Grant, and he did compliment Grant on Grant's painted toenails when Grant showed him his toenails. So, but still, the idea of doing things and saying, oh, what, so the girl goes and puts her dress on and brushes her hair and maybe even puts a little bit of makeup on or whatever you say, or some jewelry, and then, right, the very sort of traditional notions, you say, oh, what a precious little girl, what a sweet little lady, right? Right, and just to reinforce. So there's a performance. The child does something, and then we say, oh, that's wonderful. Or we say, oh, well, that's an interesting choice, honey. Are you done playing dress up now? You're going to put on what you're really going to wear to school? Right? So there's that performance and that response, right? So in social learning theory, sex is irrelevant, right? In social learning theory, sex, by sex I mean like the body, right? When I say the body, I always look down toward genitals, right? But sex is irrelevant in all this. The idea being that any child can be raised as male or female. It doesn't even matter. The famous case of this, the case known as John Doe, that we do actually know the person's name now, had been born, or I guess Jane Doe, had been born as a male, and then during circumcision, using my understanding is a circumcision process sort of outmoded. It uses a cauterizer. It wasn't ever considered a very good practice. Severely damaged the penis. And so when the child got slightly older, they decided to perform surgery so that the boy would live as a girl. Or actually, they decided that this would be done when the child's older. So they said, we'll just start raising the boy as a girl because once he gets a little bit older, we're going to remove his penis. So because it's been so deformed by this cauterizer that was used during circumcision. So for years, the child was raised as a girl, and then in high school, she began dressing more like a boy, right, and decided it didn't identify as a female. And so at first it was saying, this is a success that she can be raised as a girl, and later it was said, it's a failure of nurture because you see, it turns out deep down she knew she was a boy, as opposed to something else about the fact that means that, again, the assumption of what must be according to the body that, maybe just this person really preferred the clothing of boys and happened to like, having sex with girls, right? Which is sort of what happened. This person did end up later in life committing suicide. It's a sad ending to a story. Anyway, there's a documentary about, and if you're interested, I can maybe find the link for PBS. Might still have it. It's a PBS documentary that aired a good 15 years or so ago. Anywho, so in all of this, in social learning theory, sex, right, the makeup of the body is irrelevant. It's all about the child does something, we say, oh, how nice, or we shame them in some way. So again, real quick example. My niece always liked wearing just like t-shirt and shorts. T-shirt and shorts always. When she was just a little girl, like 2 or 3 years old, my sister would try to buy dresses for her, even it just had like a shiny button on them, because my niece did not like anything frilly. And my niece would say, no, too shiny, too shiny. She didn't want skirts, she didn't want anything frilly, right? And so my mom said that for her 8th grade graduation, I was, I guess it was in grad school, I wasn't there for it. She was wearing a dress, and my mom said that everybody made sure to tell her how nice she looked in her dress, right? Reinforcing that performance. By the way, my niece, gotta love that kid, who's a grown woman now, but she would then, somebody would say that, would then pull up her dress and let you know that, don't worry, she had shorts on underneath. Okay, anyway, so social learning theory, sex is irrelevant. Social learning theory gets us to symbolic interactionism, and I put it in gray, it's sort of part of this, right? So with the looking glass self, we would think of a person, right? I have an image there representing a person, and then when the person looks in a mirror, and not necessarily a literal mirror, but figuratively, when we think of ourselves, when we see ourselves, what do we see? The looking glass self says that it's the product of other people, right? There's all those other people, and how they see us, or really, probably more importantly, how we think they see us. So the things that they say to us, or the things that we hear them saying about us, forms the image that we have of ourselves, which may be very much, not obscure, but may be misconstrued. There's a word I'm looking for, but you know what I'm saying, right? It may be very wrong, right? And so that's, again, it's the idea that this is related to that how we see ourselves, right, comes from how others talk to us. And so again, think about those studies I talked about in our class on what that would have been September 2nd, right? That the studies in which parents, how they begin talking about their newborn baby differently according to whether it's a boy or a girl. You can see how that might influence the behaviors of a boy or a girl as they're growing. So that's social learning theory. A difference, I don't want to say contrast, but something different from that is cognitive development theory. And this is the idea that children pick models, right? So as opposed to this performance response, that children pick a model and that's what they follow. So when my daughter was, she would have been about 2 years old, I think, maybe. Year and a half, 2 years old, she loved carrying around bags. Take a little bag and put it on her shoulder, right? Actually, she was crawling. So she was a year old and she was doing it even. And my mother was glad because at this time, my daughter was still at home with me. Even when I went back to work full time, 2 days a week she was with my in-laws. 2 days a week she was with my in-laws. The other 3 days of the work week, my daughter was at home with me, and then of course we were all together on the weekend. And that was the second semester, the second 6 months of her life. The first 6 months of her life, my wife Ivy was home for about 2 months, and then I was at home with the baby while my wife went back to work full time. And so my mother, seeing how much time I was spending with our daughter, and actually even when she started in daycare, she'd be in daycare like 2 days a week, with my in-laws 1 or 2 days, and then with me otherwise, right? So my daughter was with me more than she was with my wife. And my mom said when she saw Eleanor carrying around a little bag on her shoulder, she said, "Oh, well, that's good. I'm glad to see that she's following the example of Ivy. I just didn't know it was going to happen spending so much time with Wesley." Right? And my mom didn't think I was a bad person, but she was saying, again, the idea that always being with me, a male, and a cisgender male, right, that my daughter was not going to pick up on these feminine habits and behaviors like, say, a purse over the shoulder. My wife and I did try to explain to my mom that Eleanor, really never sees either one of us leave the home without a bag, because first off, whenever you have a small child and you leave the home, you always have a diaper bag on your shoulder. And also, whenever I go to work, it's a messenger bag, right, slung over my shoulder. So I always walk out the door with a bag over my shoulder, a diaper bag or a messenger bag. I always have a bag on my shoulder. But again, that notion of the child picks a model and they follow that, right? And the idea here is that kids figure out what an appropriate model is. And that's based on what other adults and other children are saying of who should be looked up to. If not overtly like, you should look up to them, right? But perhaps saying, wow, what a great person, or wow, look at them, or they're so impressive, right? That kids figure out. They sort of learn from the many cues around them where they should be picking their models, right? And who their models should be. And that's how the boys figure out to pattern themselves after cisgendered males and girls after cisgender females. So when we go to Carol Gilligan, who is a feminist psychoanalyst, she goes back to the mother as well here. And so we talked before about Nancy Chodorow and the idea that girls connect with mothers, so therefore they become relationally dependent, and boys don't connect with mothers, so they become relationally independent. Sort of similar, but different to that, is that she says, Carol Gilligan says, that because the mother is so nurturing with the daughter, right? Again, see how we're like each other, right? And engages in things with her more. The girl develops an identity about relationship, right? The girl develops a relationship identity, or identities based on relationship, because when she's just there as a little girl, she's looking up at mom, and mom's doing all these things with her, right? And mom is her role model. So mom's the role model. Mom's doing lots of things with me. She learns that her identity is based in relating to people, right? So she's following mom's habit of relating. Boys, seeing mom's not doing that so much with me, develop a non-relationship identity, and then do not define themselves so much by their relationships, but maybe by what they do. Right? So that's cognitive development. Quick roundup, sort of. If we look at social learning theory vis-a-vis cognitive development theories, sex and social learning theory, again, no role, doesn't matter. Cognitive development is a minimal role, right? There's a minimal role of it in cognitive development, because the girl's going to try to find a role model she's going to be encouraged to find a role model that's a female. Think about, by the way, psychoanalysis, sex has a huge role, right? If we're to look at something psychoanalytic. The child, in a social learning perspective, is very passive, right? They're just responding to the messages that they're getting, as opposed to in cognitive development, the child is actively seeking out those role models. And again, the child is somewhat passive in psychoanalysis because it's all about what the parents or really the mother is doing. And the motive, or really the motivation, right, of the child in social learning theory, it's external. The child is doing things to get the, what a good boy, or what a sweet, what a big, strong boy you are, and what a sweet little girl you are. The child's motivations are all external to his or herself. And in cognitive development, those motivations are internal. I'm looking for the model that's going to be right for me. Right? So those are ways of differentiating social learning theory and cognitive development theory. But they, like psychoanalytic theory, are part of the psychological theories that we talk about in gender and communication.